The stars burned cold and distant above Earth, as humanity's fate was sealed in the halls of the Galactic Council. The galaxy's greatest powers, ancient, mighty species, gathered together, their eyes cold and full of judgment. And standing in the center of it all, in a room full of sneering faces and whispered lies, was Earth's representative. He was a man named Admiral Thomas Kane, a soldier and diplomat who had dedicated his life to serving his planet. A man who had once believed that humanity could stand shoulder to shoulder with the great civilizations of the galaxy. But now, as he stood before the council, he understood just how foolish that belief had been. "You are a danger to the galaxy," the Vaulter delegate, a towering alien with silver skin, said, his voice a low rumble that echoed across the chamber. "Your species has shown time and time again that you cannot be trusted. You are violent, unpredictable, and, frankly, unsuited for the peace we have built." Kane's hands were clenched at his sides, but he stood tall, his gaze unwavering. He had expected this. After all, humanity had made mistakes, terrible mistakes. Wars, greed, chaos, but they had also fought to rise above it. They had struggled to prove they were more than the sum of their flaws. But none of that mattered to the Council. To them, humanity was just another unstable species, a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. "The vote is final," another counselor, a pale, insect-like alien, hissed. "Humanity is to be exiled, banishment to the farthest reaches of the galaxy. You will not be allowed to return to galactic space, ever." Kane's heart pounded, but he didn't flinch. This wasn't a surprise. He had known deep down that humanity would be cast aside. The Vaulter and their allies had been watching them for centuries, waiting for the slightest reason to remove them. Humanity's fire, their drive, their unwillingness to back down, it was a threat to those who preferred control over chaos. He took a breath, steadying himself. The decision had been made, but that didn't mean he would accept it without a fight. "You've made a mistake," Kane said, his voice steady but with a weight of emotion beneath it. "You are wrong about us. We are not a threat. We are survivors, we are builders, and one day you will regret this." The room fell silent. The council members exchanged glances, some shaking their heads in disbelief. The Vaulter delegate, whose name was Velor, stepped forward. His face was unreadable, but Kane could feel the contempt in his gaze. "Regret, you are nothing. The galaxy has advanced far beyond your petty wars and selfish desires. We've learned to live in harmony. Your kind can never be a part of that." With a flick of his wrist, Velor signaled for the final verdict to be given. "Banishment is immediate. You will be sent to a remote, desolate world, far from the reaches of any inhabited system. The rest of the galaxy will forget you. And if you ever return..." Kane didn't need to hear the threat. He knew what would happen. The galaxy would wipe them out if they ever returned. Humanity would be erased from existence just like that. As the decision was made, the floor beneath Kane's feet began to hum. The chamber walls shimmered with a dark, pulsing light, as if the entire room was resonating with the weight of what had just occurred. This was it. Humanity was cast away. The journey to their new home was long, harsh, and filled with bitterness. Kane sat alone in the cockpit of the shuttle that carried him and the last remaining humans, those few who had not yet perished in the chaos of the Council's final decision. They had been cast out but not forgotten by each other. Humanity had always clung to the belief that survival was more than just breathing. It was about hope. And though hope was a dim ember in the cold vacuum of space, it still burned within them. As they entered the unknown reaches of the galaxy, Earth's blue-green oceans and vast skies grew smaller and smaller in the rearview mirror. Kane looked at the planet he had fought for, the planet he had loved. Earth was just a speck now, far behind them, and in its place lay only darkness. He wondered how long it would take before they too were forgotten by the stars. How long before no one remembered who they were. It didn't matter. They would survive, humans always did. They arrived at the edge of an uncharted system, a place no one had ever dared to settle. It was a barren, lifeless world on the fringe of the galaxy, far from any trade routes or well-traveled space lanes. A place of death. A place where the very air was toxic, the soil barren, and the stars distant. The kind of world where the gods might have cast away the worst of their kind. But for humanity, it was a new beginning. They established a colony there under the harshest of conditions. The planet was inhospitable, but human ingenuity knew no bounds. With every setback, they found a way forward. They built cities beneath the surface, crafted technology that could survive the planet's deadly storms, and learned to extract resources from the lifeless rock. At first, they were forgotten by the galaxy, just as the Council had intended. But over the years, whispers began to spread in the dark corners of space. Ships that passed through the outer rim sometimes came back with strange stories. Distress signals sent from unexplored regions of space were met with warnings from the edge of human space. They said the humans were building something massive. The galactic powers had never bothered to look back at Earth's exiles. They thought humanity was no more. They thought the humans had perished. But they had underestimated them. Years passed and the human spirit only grew stronger. They had been broken, banished, forgotten, but in that loneliness they had found their true strength. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, will to survive. And now it was time for the galaxy to remember that humans did not bend to fate. They made their own. The stars would soon know the truth. Humanity was not gone. Humanity was coming back, and this time nothing would stop them. For centuries, humanity had been alone in the dark corners of the galaxy. The isolation had been painful, a constant reminder of their banishment. But in the depths of that darkness, something extraordinary had happened. The exiles, the forgotten ones, had not just survived, they had thrived. They had rebuilt, retooled, and reinvented themselves. Their technology had grown far beyond what the galaxy had ever seen, and their hunger for vengeance against the Council that had abandoned them burned brighter than any star. Now it was time for humanity to make its mark on the galaxy once again. The first step came unexpectedly. A ship, sleek and deadly, appeared in the deep void of space, its engines humming with quiet power. It was a warship like no other, made with alloys stronger than anything the galaxy's most advanced races could produce. It moved silently, blending into the dark of space like a predator stalking its prey. The Vigilance was humanity's pride, a ship of war designed for one purpose: to send a message. Admiral Thomas Kane stood at the helm, watching as the alien stars blinked softly on the view screen. It was surreal. After all this time, after all the isolation, the suffering, humanity was about to return to the galaxy that had cast them aside. And this time they wouldn't be ignored. Kane's hands gripped the controls, his face a mask of determination. "Prepare for transmission," he ordered. His voice was calm, but inside his heart beat like a war drum. This wasn't just a mission. This was humanity's statement to the galaxy. A soft hum filled the room as the communication system came online. The ship sent out a signal, a simple message, a warning. One sentence, loud and clear: "Humanity has returned, prepare yourselves." It was a declaration, a challenge. The galaxy had been too quiet for too long, but now they would see what it meant to face the human spirit. Back on the Volter homeworld, the Council received the message with an air of disbelief. Velor, the same delegate who had condemned humanity's existence, was the first to hear the transmission. At first, he thought it was some kind of joke, a desperate, misguided attempt by a dying species to remind the galaxy of their presence. The Volter were ancient, and they had seen many species rise and fall. They had long forgotten the humans they had banished to the edges of the universe. "Is it possible?" Velor muttered under his breath. He was not one to be easily startled, but something in the transmission unsettled him. He called an emergency meeting of the Council. It wasn't long before the other members arrived, their various alien forms filling the Council chamber with an uneasy tension. The room, normally full of pride and arrogance, was quiet now. All eyes turned to Velor. "The humans have sent a message," Velor began, his voice laced with confusion and anger. "They are alive, and they are threatening us." A murmur rippled through the room. The other Council members exchanged nervous glances. The Volter had cast humanity aside, yes, but they had never truly expected them to rise again. And yet here it was. A fleet, powerful, deadly, had reappeared in the galaxy. "Do they not understand their place?" One of the other counselors, an insected species known as the Aeska, hissed. "This is an insult. The galaxy has moved beyond them. We cannot allow this." Velor's eyes narrowed. "We cannot allow it, but neither can we ignore it. We will send a fleet to deal with them." The Vigilance cruised toward the Volter homeworld, undeterred. Kane could feel the tension rise with every passing moment, but there was no turning back. This was it. He had come to remind the galaxy of humanity's strength, and now it was time to make that statement clear. The ship's sensors pinged, and a low hum filled the bridge. It was the Volter fleet. A massive armada, ships stretching across the horizon like a sea of metal and fire, appeared on the view screen. Their weapons were powered up, and their intentions were clear. They were not here to negotiate. Kane's jaw clenched. They thought they could simply crush humanity. They thought humanity was weak, a relic of the past. They had forgotten how wrong they were. "Battle stations," Kane ordered, his voice firm and unshakable. "Prepare for combat." Humanity's ships came alive with purpose. The Vigilance powered up its weapons, massive railguns, plasma cannons, and energy shields stronger than anything the Vaulter had encountered. The human ships moved with terrifying precision, the crew working in perfect unison. It was a sight to behold, as if the entire ship was one single living organism, each part of it working together to achieve victory. The first volley came from the Vaulter ships, plasma blasts and energy beams that lit up the void. But the human fleet had already moved, their ships darting and weaving like ghosts in the night. The Vaulter's attacks missed, striking only the empty void where the human ships had been moments before. The Vigilance fired its first shot, massive slugs of metal the size of small buildings. They tore through the Vaulter fleet like a hurricane, ripping apart ships with brutal efficiency. One Vaulter warship exploded in a burst of light, its wreckage scattering across the cold expanse of space. The battle was chaos. It was everything humanity had been preparing for, everything they had dreamed of. They had been cast aside, forgotten. But now they were reclaiming their place in the galaxy, one explosion at a time. The Vaulter fleet faltered, their lines breaking apart as human ships tore through them. A second Vaulter vessel, larger and more heavily armored, turned its weapons on the Vigilance. A direct hit from their main cannon struck the human ship's shields, shaking the entire vessel. For a moment, Kane felt the impact deep in his bones, but he remained steady. He had known it wouldn't be easy, but this was humanity's time. They would not falter. "Return fire," Kane shouted. The Vigilance unleashed its full fury. The Vaulter ship, massive though it was, stood no chance. It was torn apart by a flurry of shots, its shields shattered, its hull breached, its engines sent into a chaotic spiral of destruction. The Vigilance didn't stop. They couldn't afford to. The galaxy needed to see this. They needed to understand the price of underestimating humanity. When the final blast of the battle echoed through space, the Vaulter fleet was in tatters. The Vigilance emerged from the wreckage, battered but victorious. Humanity had delivered its message loud and clear. The Vaulter Council sat in stunned silence. They had thought humanity was gone, erased from history, but the humans had returned, and with a vengeance. Their military might had shattered the pride of the galaxy's greatest empire. "Call for reinforcements," one of the counselors whispered, his voice shaking. This is only the beginning." But deep down, they all knew the truth. Humanity had returned, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The stars stretched out before them, distant and cold. The Vigilance drifted through the silence of space, its hull scarred from the battle with the Vaulter fleet. But humanity's message had been made clear. They were back, and they were not to be ignored. Admiral Thomas Kane stood at the helm, watching the stars. His face was tired, eyes hard, but there was no time for rest. The battle with the Vaulter had been a success, but it had also been only the beginning. Humanity's return to the galaxy was about to stir something far greater than they had ever anticipated. Across the galaxy, in alien spaceports, councils, and war rooms, the news spread like wildfire. Humanity has returned. The galaxy, long accustomed to peace, unity, and control under the hands of its most powerful species, suddenly felt like a place of disorder. The Vaulter were the first to feel the shock, but they were far from the last. Across every corner of the galaxy, other species, once confident in their dominance, began to fear the unknown. A whisper traveled through the systems: the humans are back. The Corps were the next to react. A reptilian race known for their brute strength and warlike tendencies, the Corps had long been a thorn in the side of many species. Their fleets were massive and their soldiers fierce. But when they received word of the human attack on the Vaulter, their first instinct was not to retreat or hesitate. It was to challenge. They were proud, they were strong, and they believed that no species could truly rise to threaten them. The Corps fleet moved quickly, determined to show the galaxy that they were the true rulers of this sector of space. But they had not fully understood what they were up against. They had underestimated humanity, just as the Vaulter had. The Corps warships arrived in the sector, their massive forms cutting through space like predators hunting in the dark. But as they crossed the boundary into the outer rim, they found something waiting for them. It wasn't a force of thousands. It was a handful of human ships, scattered, waiting in the blackness of space like ghosts. The Corps Admiral, an enormous reptilian creature with battle scars from a lifetime of war, looked at the empty void through his ship's view screen. His eyes narrowed and his tongue flicked nervously from his mouth. Where are they? Do they dare hide from us? The Admiral growled, his voice a low rumble as he clenched his claws around the command chair. Prepare to engage. We will destroy them. The fleet charged forward, weapons primed, their ships powerful and relentless. But as they reached the heart of the system, they saw it. Out of nowhere, a series of human ships dropped out of warp, surrounding the core fleet in a ring. Smaller, agile vessels, their sharp lines cutting through space like blades, darted between the larger core ships like hunters closing in on their prey. The core, proud and strong, were not used to being surrounded, especially not by so few ships. Fire, the Corps Admiral roared. The command rang through the fleet, and every core ship fired in unison, launching a barrage of plasma blasts toward the human vessels. But the humans were ready. The human ships were faster, their shields shimmering with light as they dodged and weaved with expert precision. The Corps' blasts missed by miles, leaving only empty space in their wake. The human ships didn't retaliate yet. They waited like a predator observing its prey. The Corps fleet paused, confused. How had these small, insignificant ships evaded their fire so easily? It wasn't supposed to be possible. These humans, they were too good. And then the humans struck. The Vigilance appeared out of the darkness, her guns firing first. Massive slugs of metal tore through the core ships with devastating speed, each shot hitting its target with pinpoint accuracy. Core warships exploded in flashes of fire and debris, their massive hulls ripped open, their engines sent into a destructive spiral. The core fleet began to falter, their soldiers and commanders scrambling to react. But the humans didn't let up. They pushed forward relentlessly. Human starfighters dove in and out of the chaos, striking with precision. Plasma torpedoes from human ships ripped through the core ranks, each hit sending shockwaves through space. The Corps Admiral's heart pounded in his chest as his ships started to break apart. His mind raced. He had expected a fight, but nothing like this. The humans were too quick, too efficient. Retreat, the Corps Admiral shouted, but his orders came too late. The humans were already on them. Human fighters swarmed around the last remaining core ships, relentless in their assault. The core fleet, once so mighty, was reduced to nothing. The Admiral's ship, the last survivor, tried to break free, but it was too slow. A human ship locked onto its rear and unleashed a barrage of railgun fire that tore through the core flagship, shattering its engines and sending it drifting helplessly into the void. The Corps had been humiliated. Back in the human fleet, Admiral Kane watched the devastation unfold on the view screen. His face was hard, unreadable, but inside he felt something deep, something more than victory. This was only the beginning. He didn't savor the destruction, but he understood it. He understood that this was necessary. Humanity had been forgotten, written off as nothing more than a distant, dead species. But now the galaxy was awake. The galaxy had seen the power of humanity, and that power could not be ignored. He turned to his crew, his voice steady but full of resolve. This is just the start. We've made our point, but we've only just begun to show the galaxy who we are. In the farthest reaches of the galaxy, in the council chambers of the Vaulter, the realization had begun to set in. The core fleet had been annihilated, and now the entire galaxy knew humanity was not a broken species. They had been forgotten, exiled, but now they were powerful. Now they were ready. The Vaulter delegate Velor stood at the center of the room, his face an unreadable mask. His thoughts raced, and for the first time in his life, doubt crept into his mind. What had they done? What had they underestimated? The Corps were supposed to be the ones to put them down, Velor muttered. But they were crushed in minutes. How can this be? The other council members sat in stunned silence. They were no longer certain of their previous arrogance. The humans had broken through their most powerful defenses with ease. If the Corps, one of the fiercest empires in the galaxy, had been so quickly destroyed, who was next? We were wrong to underestimate them, Velor admitted quietly. We were wrong. The galaxy was now on edge. The Vaulter, once the undisputed rulers, had realized their mistake. The Corps had learned it the hard way. And now, every species in the galaxy understood one simple truth. Humanity had returned, and they were not to be trifled with. The stars had not seen the last of them. Humanity was coming, and nothing would stop them. The galaxy trembled. News of the destruction of the core fleet spread like wildfire, reaching every corner of the known universe. The great powers of the galaxy, once united in their belief that humanity was no more, now found themselves forced to reckon with the nightmare they had long dismissed. The Vaulter were the first to act. Their pride had been shattered, their fleets decimated. The core, once a powerful empire, had been humbled in an instant. Now the Vaulter saw the truth. Humanity had returned, stronger and fiercer than ever, and they would not, allow that to continue. The Vaulter were not alone in their fear. Across the galaxy, alliances were formed. The core, humiliated and broken, pledged their forces to the Vaulter. The Aeska, a race of ruthless, insectoid warriors, joined the alliance, eager to prove themselves. Even the Tsark, a cold and calculating species known for their secretive ways, offered their support. Together, these great empires sent word to every corner of the galaxy. Humanity must be stopped, and they would stop it by any means necessary. The human fleet, meanwhile, moved in the shadows, watching, waiting. Admiral Thomas Kane had anticipated this. The galaxy would retaliate, of course. It was in their nature. But humanity was ready. On the bridge of the Vigilance, Kane stood tall, staring out at the stars. His face was calm, his expression unwavering, but inside a fire burned. The moment had come. They had made their mark, but now the galaxy's greatest powers were coming to extinguish that flame. They would not stop until humanity was nothing more than a memory. "We've had our first victory," Kane said to his crew, his voice steady. "But this is just the beginning. They will come at us with everything they have, but we've already shown them our strength. We will show them more." The crew nodded in agreement. The stakes were higher than ever, and they knew what was at risk. But they also knew that the human spirit, fueled by the fire of survival, of defiance, was unstoppable. They would face the galaxy's greatest powers and prove once and for all that humanity could not and would not be defeated. The Alliance fleet gathered in the outer rim, hundreds of ships from various species, all pointed in the same direction. Their goal was simple: eliminate humanity before their power could spread any further. The Vaulter flagship Ecliptor led the charge, its massive form casting a shadow across the dark expanse of space. Behind it, the core warships rumbled, their reptilian engines burning with fury. The Aeska followed, their ships moving with terrifying precision, and the Tsark, silent and deadly, hung at the edges, ready to strike. Admiral Velor, leader of the Vaulter, stood at the helm of the Ecliptor, watching the stars pass by in silence. He was no longer the confident, dismissive leader he had once been. The loss of the core fleet had shaken him to his core, but now he was resolved. The humans would pay for their arrogance. "We've gathered the might of the galaxy," Velor said, his voice cold. "This time we will crush them." But deep down he wondered, could it be? Could humanity truly be as dangerous as they seemed? His eyes narrowed. There was only one way to find out. The human fleet was scattered across the galaxy, but they were not unprepared. Admiral Kane had planned for this moment, and every ship was in position. The Vigilance, the flagship of the human fleet, remained at the center of it all, its weapons primed, its shields glowing with power. Surrounding it were human warships, each brimming with advanced technology that the galaxy's greatest minds had yet to understand. Smaller ships, nimble and deadly, darted through space like wolves hunting their prey. Humanity was ready. The first strike came from the enemy fleet. The Vaulter opened fire, their massive cannons unleashing torrents of plasma fire. The Vigilance shook as the blast struck its shields, but the shields held strong. Kane gritted his teeth, his hands steady on the controls. "Return fire," he ordered, his voice a calm command that carried the weight of 1,000 battles. The Vigilance's weapons powered up, and in a flash the human fleet struck back. The first volley of fire tore through the Vaulter lines, massive railgun slugs smashing through their shields and tearing apart their hulls. Alien ships erupted into explosions, their crews caught in the chaos of the attack. The human ships, smaller and faster, darted between the wreckage, dodging incoming fire with expert precision. The enemy didn't have a chance. The human fleet was too quick, too precise. Every ship had been designed with one purpose: to destroy. The humans weren't here to negotiate, to make peace. They were here to prove they were not to be trifled with, and they did just that. The Vaulter flagship Ecliptor took a direct hit from the Vigilance's main cannon, the explosion ripping through its hull. The massive ship shuddered, its engines burning out, and for a moment it seemed as though the Vaulter fleet might break. But then the core ships surged forward, their reptilian engines roaring as they slammed into the heart of the human fleet. But the core had no better luck. Human fighters dove in and out of the core warships, dodging incoming blasts and sending volley after volley of torpedoes into their massive forms. The core fleet was like a lumbering giant, but the humans were nimble like mosquitoes, always striking from unexpected angles. With every hit, the core ships buckled, their one-sprawled lines turned into twisted wreckage. As the battle raged, Kane's mind stayed focused. He knew the odds were against them. The enemy outnumbered them by far. But they had something the galaxy's greatest empires didn't, heart. They had something that couldn't be measured in weapons or fleets. They had the will to survive. They had the will to fight for their future, for their families, for their home. "We hold the line," Kane muttered under his breath. "We hold the line." The Ecliptor was finished. The core fleet was broken. But the Aeska and the Tsark still remained, their ships circling like vultures, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But the human fleet wasn't done yet. They were far from it. The next wave of fire came, faster, more ferocious. But the humans were ready. They fought back with everything they had, pushing forward, relentless. The battle became a blur of fire, explosions, and debris as the fleets collided in the vast emptiness of space. In the end, it wasn't about numbers. It wasn't about technology. It was about survival. The humans would not back down. Admiral Velor stood on the bridge of the Ecliptor, watching as the last of his fleet was consumed by the human onslaught. The galaxy had thought it could destroy humanity, but instead, they had awakened a force they couldn't control. As the last Volter ship burned and exploded into nothingness, Velor clenched his fists. The galaxy had underestimated them, and now they had seen the true power of humanity. The battle was over. The galaxy had been shown just how strong humanity had become, but Kane knew this wasn't the end. The galaxy was no longer a place where the powerful ruled. It was a place where humanity had carved out its place, and they would never be forgotten again. The galaxy was theirs, and the galaxy would never forget the name of humanity again. The heart of the galaxy had always been a place of power. It was here, in the lush sectors of well-protected star systems, that the great empires, Volter, Kor, Aeska, had built their thriving civilizations. These were the powers that had dictated the galaxy's pace for millennia. They had lived in peace with one another, their alliances built on shared dominance, on the belief that no species could rise against them. But humanity had shattered that illusion. The Vigilance was a symbol of that power, humanity's might, its unwavering refusal to bow to the will of any empire. On board that ship, Admiral Thomas Kane stood, his face illuminated by the pale light of distant stars. The battle against the Volter had been won, but it hadn't been enough. There was more to be done. The galaxy had seen humanity's strength, but they hadn't felt the full force of it yet. Humanity needed to prove something more now. It wasn't just about survival. It was about building an empire, a future on their own terms. And there was one place left in the galaxy where the tide could be turned. The Aeska stronghold, a massive fortress built into the heart of a dying star system. The Aeska had watched humanity's rise with disdain, dismissing them as mere survivors. But now they would pay the price for their arrogance. Humanity was coming. Admiral Kane stood on the bridge of the Vigilance, his eyes hard. His ship was surrounded by other human warships, each a masterwork of design, each capable of turning the tide of battle with a single strike. The crew was ready. They had fought many battles, and they had come out victorious. Now it was time to make the galaxy's greatest power feel the weight of humanity's wrath. "Captain Hayes," Kane called, turning to the woman at his side. "Yes, Admiral," Captain Alana Hayes responded, her voice steady, even as her eyes betrayed the tension she felt. She was the heart of the human fleet, brave, bold, and relentless in battle. "I need you to lead the assault on the Aeska stronghold. We need to show them that humanity will not be ignored." Captain Hayes nodded without hesitation. She had fought by Kane's side for years, and she knew the stakes as well as he did. This wasn't just another battle. This was the moment humanity would be remembered for. They would not just survive, they would thrive no matter the odds. The Aeska stronghold loomed ahead, its massive starbase surrounded by layers of defensive shields and weapon systems. The moment the human fleet dropped out of warp, the Aeska knew something was wrong. The size of the human armada was staggering. Their fleets were often large, but humanity had come with a force that dwarfed anything they had seen before. It was clear. The humans were not here for diplomacy. They were here for war. Admiral Malzer, the leader of the Aeska, stood in his command center, his insectoid eyes scanning the battlefield. He had seen countless enemies, fleets from every corner of the galaxy. But this was different. These humans had been nothing but ants to him a mere year ago. Now they were here on his doorstep, ready to strike. "Prepare to engage," he ordered, his voice a sharp command. "We will not let them take our home." The Aeska fleet surged forward, their ships massive, their weapons crackling with power. The battlefield erupted in a storm of fire and fury as the two fleets collided, a roar of destruction filling the void. The Aeska ships fired first, sending waves of energy blasts toward the human ships. But the humans were prepared. Captain Hayes' fleet moved with the precision of a well-oiled machine. Every ship responded to the other's movements, each strike calculated, each maneuver executed with brutal efficiency. The Aeska's first wave of attacks missed, striking only empty space where human ships had been moments before. The humans weren't here to play, they were here to win. Captain Hayes barked orders from her command chair, her eyes scanning the chaos unfolding on the screens before her. "All ships form a perimeter. Focus fire on the enemy flagship. We'll make them regret ever doubting us." The Vigilance was at the center of the human fleet, its massive railguns charging as it turned toward the heart of the Aeska fleet. The enemy flagship, a massive vessel lined with layers of armor, loomed in the distance, its weapons crackling with destructive energy. But Hayes wasn't worried. Humanity had something the Aeska didn't: unyielding will. The first volley from the Vigilance struck the Aeska flagship with such force that it rocked the entire ship. The shields flared brightly and then collapsed, unable to withstand the raw power of humanity's weapons. The Vigilance fired again, and the flagship's hull buckled, its engines rupturing as flames shot from the breach. Admiral Mauser watched in shock as his flagship was torn apart in front of his eyes. He had underestimated humanity, and now it was too late. His fleet was disintegrating. The human fleet, smaller in numbers but superior in every other way, tore through his ships with ruthless efficiency. Each strike seemed to come from nowhere, each explosion lighting up the void with the brilliance of 1,000 suns. "Retreat," Mauser screeched, his voice full of panic. But it was already too late. His ships were breaking apart, his fleet scattered and destroyed. The humans were everywhere, relentless and unstoppable. Captain Hayes watched the destruction unfold, her heart pounding with the excitement of battle. She had led them here, and now she would see this through to the end. "Finish them," she said, her voice calm but filled with the weight of her words. "We don't leave survivors." The remaining Aeska ships were no match for the human fleet. One by one, they were picked off, their weapons falling silent as human ships closed in for the final blow. The Aeska flagship, once proud and powerful, was nothing more than a burning wreck, its crew lost to the stars. Back on the Vigilance, Admiral Kane watched the final moments of the battle. He felt the adrenaline in his veins, but there was no triumph in his expression. This was just another victory in a war that humanity had no intention of losing. "We've done it," Captain Hayes said, a rare smile crossing her face. But it was fleeting. She knew the galaxy would not forget this battle. The Aeska were done, but there were still others out there, watching, waiting for their chance to strike. Humanity's message had been heard, but it had not been fully understood. Kane nodded grimly. "This isn't over. We've sent a message, but the galaxy will come at us again, and when they do, we'll be ready." Humanity had become something no one had expected, a force to be reckoned with. They were not just survivors anymore. They were warriors, unstoppable in their resolve, relentless in their pursuit of their future. As the remains of the Aeska fleet drifted into the darkness of space, Kane stood tall. This wasn't just about fighting for their survival anymore. This was about building an empire, a future where humanity would rule. And nothing would stop them. The stars of the galaxy stretched out before them, infinite and cold. But for Admiral Thomas Kane and the human fleet, the coldness of space felt like a distant memory. They had fought for so long, survived against all odds, and risen beyond what anyone had ever thought possible. Yet in the silence of space, a new tension gripped their hearts, the realization that the galaxy's great empires, shattered but not defeated, would soon unite against them. In the wake of their overwhelming victory against the Aeska, humanity had proven that they were not simply survivors. They were conquerors, fighters, and rulers in the making. But the galaxy had always been a place where power shifted like the winds. The defeated Aeska were broken, but the Voltor, Kor, and the other great empires of the galaxy remained. Humanity's fight had only just begun. On board the Vigilance, Kane stood before the massive view screen, staring into the cold abyss of space. His face, usually filled with resolve, now showed the weight of the realization that this war wasn't just about survival. It was about establishing humanity's place in a galaxy that had once cast them aside. Admiral, Captain Alana Hayes said, her voice steady but with an edge of concern. The Vaulter are gathering, and so are the others. They are preparing for something big. They've united in their hatred of us. Kane nodded slowly, his mind working through the information. The message was clear. The galaxy had not yet learned the true lesson humanity was trying to teach. The galaxy's greatest powers were preparing to strike back with everything they had. They were always going to come for us, Kane said quietly. Now they're coming together. This is the turning point. If we don't show them our full strength now, we'll never get another chance. In the heart of Vaulter space, in the gleaming, ancient halls of their council, the leaders of the galaxy's greatest empires gathered once more. Their pride, shattered by humanity's relentless rise, had not yet healed, but their resolve had. They could no longer stand idly by. The human threat had to be eradicated, and it had to be done now. Vaulter Admiral Velor, who had watched in disbelief as the human fleet tore through his own and the core forces, stood at the front of the council. His once calm demeanor had been replaced by a fire that burned in his chest. He had seen humanity's power firsthand, and it had filled him with a mixture of fear and rage. "We must unite or we will all fall," Velor said, his voice cold. "The core, Azka and Sark stand with us. We will make them understand that no one, no species, can challenge the might of the galaxy's rulers." The room was silent, but the tension was palpable. It had been a long time since the galaxy's great empires had worked together. Alliances had been made and broken, each race believing itself to be the true ruler of the stars. But now one species had come to challenge them all. "We will crush them before they can strike again," Velor continued, his eyes narrowing as he glanced around the room, meeting the eyes of each delegate. "We send every fleet we have, no mercy, no escape." The other delegates nodded in grim agreement. Humanity had become an enemy they could no longer ignore. It was time to end the threat once and for all. Back aboard the Vigilance, the weight of the situation pressed down on Admiral Kane's shoulders. His mind worked furiously. He had anticipated this moment, the moment when the galaxy's greatest powers would unite against humanity. But knowing it was coming didn't make the task any easier. "We need to prepare," Kane said, his voice grim. "This will be our hardest fight. We don't know what they're planning, but we do know one thing: they won't stop until we're gone. We need to strike first." Captain Hayes moved to his side, her gaze steady. "What do you want to do, sir?" Kane looked out at the vast emptiness of space. For a moment, his mind flashed to the battles they had already fought and won, against impossible odds, against those who thought humanity had no place in the stars. They had proven their strength, their will to survive. But now they needed more than strength. They needed something the galaxy's empires didn't have. "We're going to show them what humanity is truly capable of," Kane said, his voice low but full of fire. "We will strike at the heart of their alliance. We'll hit them where it hurts most." Hayes nodded, understanding the gravity of the plan. It was a bold move, one that could either shatter their enemies or cost them everything. But they had no choice. Humanity had to stand now or it would fall. As the united fleets of the galaxy's great powers assembled, their ships, hundreds strong, moved like a tidal wave toward human-controlled space. The first battle of this new war would be decisive. The fate of the galaxy was about to be written in the cold void of space. The Vigilance led the human fleet into position, accompanied by a dozen other ships, each one filled with the hopes of an entire species. They had prepared for this moment. Their weapons were charged, their shields raised. Humanity wasn't going to back down. Captain Hayes stood at her post, watching as the enemy fleet approached on the radar. It was a massive armada, far larger than their own, but she knew that numbers wouldn't win this fight. It was the strength of the human spirit, the unyielding resolve, that would make the difference. The moment of truth had arrived. The human fleet was no longer a ragtag group of survivors. They were an empire in the making, and today they would prove it to the galaxy. "All ships prepare to engage," Kane ordered, his voice calm but full of authority. "This is it. Fight for humanity, fight for our future." The battle began with a fury that shook the very stars. Energy blasts, railgun fire, and plasma torpedoes lit up the darkness as the fleets collided in a violent dance of destruction. The human ships, agile and swift, moved like a storm through the larger, slower ships of their enemies. Each shot fired was precise, each movement calculated. The enemy's united fleets fought with all their might, but they were too slow, too predictable. The human fleet struck with precision, devastating the Vulture ships first. The once-proud empires that had ruled the galaxy for centuries now found themselves on the defensive, struggling to cope with the unexpected ferocity of the human assault. But it wasn't just the weapons that made the difference, it was the human resolve. The crews fought not just for survival, but for something greater, the future of their species, their place in the stars. Kane watched the chaos unfold, his mind focused. His heart raced with every battle cry, every explosion. The stakes had never been higher, but he knew that humanity's victory wasn't just about defeating the enemy. It was about proving to the galaxy that they had a place in it. And as the battle raged on, one truth became clear: humanity would not be forgotten. The galaxy's great empires had made a terrible mistake. They had underestimated humanity's power, its heart, and its ability to rise above every challenge. Now they would learn. Humanity was not just a survivor. Humanity was the future, and nothing would stop them. The final battle had come. The galaxy's greatest empires, shattered and broken after their collective attempts to erase humanity, now faced the unstoppable force they had so recklessly underestimated. Humanity had proven itself a force to be reckoned with, and now the rest of the galaxy would feel its power in ways they could never imagine. Admiral Thomas Kane stood on the bridge of the Vigilance, watching the distant lights of the battle unfold in the cold expanse of space. His hands gripped the command chair, his mind racing through everything they had fought for. Victory was within their grasp, but it came at a cost. This was the moment that would determine humanity's future in the galaxy. They had been pushed to the edge, their very existence threatened, but now they were more than just survivors. They had risen. They were no longer the forgotten exiles. Humanity was an empire in the making. The enemy fleets, once so confident in their power, now looked like scattered remnants of what they had once been. The core, the Vulture, the Tsark, they had all tried to destroy humanity, to wipe them from the stars. But they had failed. Each of their fleets, each of their best ships had been torn apart by the human resolve, the human spirit that refused to be extinguished. And now, with the last of their forces gathered, humanity would deliver the final blow. "Admiral, the remaining fleets are retreating," Captain Alana Hayes reported, her voice calm but tinged with the excitement of the moment. "They're broken. They can't fight us anymore." Kane nodded but didn't allow himself to feel relief just yet. He had been in too many battles to let victory come too easily. The galaxy's great empires had fought for too long to hold on to their power, and now they were learning the true cost of underestimating humanity. The war wasn't over yet, but it was close. "They're not retreating," Kane said softly, his voice firm. "They're running, and we won't let them get away. We finish this here, today." The human fleet surged forward, its ships cutting through the battlefield with purpose. The enemy fleets, once united in their desire to destroy humanity, were now disorganized, broken by the speed and ferocity of the human assault. The core ships, their engines still roaring with anger, attempted to regroup. The Vulture, proud and defiant, tried to rally their forces, but they were no match for the onslaught that came for them. The Vigilance led the charge, its railguns firing relentlessly, tearing apart enemy ships with pinpoint precision. The massive dreadnought was at the heart of the human fleet, a symbol of their strength and resolve. Behind it, smaller human warships darted through the chaos, their weapons blazing as they tore into the last remnants of the enemy's forces. Every human ship was a weapon, every crew member a warrior determined to secure their place in the galaxy. The Vulture flagship Ecliptor had once been the symbol of their power. Now it was nothing more than a target. Kane watched the view screen as the ship's massive hull was torn open by the Vigilance's railgun fire. Explosions rocked the Ecliptor, sending pieces of its broken form drifting into space. The Vulture fleet began to crumble, and with it, the last vestiges of the galaxy's old order. "We've broken them," Hayes said, a rare smile on her face. But there was no time to savor the victory. "We have to finish this, Admiral. If we let them regroup, they'll come for us again." Kane's jaw tightened. "We won't give them the chance." The final moments of the battle were a blur of fire, explosions, and broken ships. The core fleet was the next to fall, their massive vessels ripped apart by human torpedoes and energy weapons. The core had always prided themselves on their size and strength, but in the end, it was their arrogance that led to their downfall. The humans had learned the art of war in the most brutal of circumstances, and now they were applying it with terrifying efficiency. The Aeska, the final holdouts of the enemy alliance, tried to hold their ground, their insected ships darting in and out of the chaos, striking when they thought they had the advantage. But they, too, had underestimated humanity. The human fleet moved like a tide, relentless and unstoppable. Each Aeska ship that fell only fueled the human resolve to press forward. The enemy had no chance now. They were too slow, too disorganized, and they lacked the fire that burned in every human soldier's chest. With one final blast, the Aeska flagship exploded, its towering form disintegrating in a flash of light. The last of the enemy forces was scattered, defeated, and broken. In the silence that followed, Kane allowed himself a moment to breathe. His hands, still gripping the chair, were trembling with the weight of everything they had just accomplished. The war was over. Humanity had won. And now they stood at the doorstep of something greater. "We did it," Captain Hayes said softly, her voice filled with awe. "We've broken the Empire, we've claimed our place." Kane turned to her, his eyes filled with a mix of pride and determination. "This is just the beginning." In the aftermath of the battle, the galaxy had changed forever. The once great empires that had ruled for millennia were now a shadow of their former selves. The Vaulter, the Core, and the Aeska were defeated. Their fleets shattered, their power broken, and in their place stood humanity. The human fleet, battered but unbowed, began to move toward the center of the galaxy. There were still many stars to conquer, many systems to claim. But humanity now controlled the heart of the galaxy, the very systems that had once been the domain of the galaxy's oldest and most powerful races. Admiral Kane stood before the assembled crew of the Vigilance, his face illuminated by the soft light of the stars. "This is our time," he said, his voice strong and filled with purpose. "The galaxy thought they could wipe us out. They thought they could cast us aside. But they were wrong. We've proven that humanity can stand tall among the stars. And now we will build something that will last. We will build an empire where humanity's strength will never be questioned again." The crew erupted into cheers, the sound of victory echoing throughout the ship. The war was over. The galaxy had seen humanity's power, and now they would rule it. Nothing would stop them. Nothing would stand in their way. Humanity had been banished. Humanity had been forgotten. But humanity had returned. And now the galaxy belonged to them.